Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss progress with cloud computing in the federal government. With me today on the show are Dave McClure, the Associate Administrator of the Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technologies at the GSA, Pete Tseronis, the Chief Technology Officer, the Department of Energy, Dave Mihelcic, the Chief Technology Officer at DISA, Curt Aubley, the CTO, Cyber and Innovation at Lockheed Martin Information Systems and Global Solutions, Greg Pryzby, the Senior Solutions Architect at Red Hat Public Sector, and Joe Moorcones, Corporate Vice President of Cybersecurity at SafeNet. Let's get right into the issues and let's talk about cloud. It's certainly a hot topic these days. Everybody's talking cloud. So let's talk to our panelists about their role and some of the specific initiatives with cloud computing at their respective agency, especially in response to this 25-point plan that calls for cloud-first considerations. Let's start with Dave McClure. Dave, GSA, I know, is playing a central role in this and is right in the heart of these issues. Can you give us some insights as to the things you're doing in this area?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, and good afternoon, Jim. My office is really a catalyst, playing a catalyst role in the adoption of cloud computing. The Federal Program Management Office for Cloud Computing is in OSCIT. So we're working on several fronts. We're trying to work with FAST to open up procurement vehicles that are very conducive to cloud services. We're working with the White House on FedRAMP, which is the attempt to bring some of the security issues into a little bit more common framework that can be used across government. And we're a user of cloud services. We kind of walk the talk. So a lot of the social media things that my office has been doing over the last couple of years, such as IdeaScale, Challenge.gov, these are all cloud-based solutions. So helping in terms of being a catalyst and also using cloud services to deliver common solutions across the government.
Practicing what you preach.
Absolutely.
And not only facilitating but also doing. Pete Tseronis over at Energy, tell us, Pete, a little bit about some of the initiatives and how a department like Energy is looking at cloud computing.
Sure. So, again, good afternoon, and I do have to give a shout-out to Dave's leadership, the folks at GSA, of course, Mr. Kundra. I've had the pleasure of working with this crew on the Cloud Computing Advisory Council, being able to see and hear about what's happening in the federal sector across all agencies and how that it can apply back at the department. I'm excited about the opportunity, and on the one hand, that cloud fits into this one of those streams, if you will, of innovation and next generation strategies to improve efficiencies at the department. At Energy, we've embraced the 25-point plan. We've got 3 cloud initiatives, cloud-first initiatives. We've pushed forward in that space with our energy.gov site. We're looking at our PKI, our infrastructure, if you will, for public key infrastructure initiatives and strategies. But more importantly, we're looking at the opportunity to leverage what GSA's put out there. We have such a broad distributed agency, if you will, with the lab community, the program office community. We've got instantiations of cloud out there today, of some that we'll speak about later on in the panel, folks who are moving down that path. And then in headquarters, we're in that realm of wanting to take advantage of the work that FAS is doing in terms of putting some cloud venues out there, whether it's infrastructure platform or software as a service. But I definitely could speak to the fact that just last summer we did a crowdsourcing exercise to develop our strategic plan, leverage the software as a service application, user voice, and the Amazon cloud to kind of really get the dialogue going, not just about modernization in the cloud realm, but across the department. So our lab community has really been at the forefront of reaching out and embracing the cloud and that paradigm. And I'd like to just say that the dialogue and the collaboration in the federal sector led by GSA is something that I'm pretty excited about and plan to use, as I've been asked recently to lead the department's strategic effort in the cloud arena.
Terrific. It's amazing how much, and I think cloud's forcing everybody to rethink a lot of things, you know. I mean, even with like data center consolidation, what do we move, what do we keep, what do we push to the cloud, and so forth. Curt Aubley over Lockheed Martin in the role of CTO. How does your thinking and strategies change with the cloud picture, and how is Lockheed positioning to support your government customer?
Well, good afternoon, Jim. Thanks for having me on today. So a friend of mine recently said we're almost in a technology renaissance right now, and I kind of look at it that way because there's so many opportunities, especially with cloud and other areas right now. So pretty fortunate to be the largest IT provider for the federal government.
Right.
We have close to 3,000 customer programs, and each one of those customers have a little different mission, and they're at a different maturity level of leveraging cloud computing. So our approach is not any one segment of cloud, but what we refer to as solution as a service. That's focused on helping our customers succeed in their business objectives or their mission objectives. So I work very closely on the next generation of capabilities across the whole gamut of cloud and ensuring it's secure. Internally, we've been running cloud computing for my R&D labs for over 3 years now, and starting to roll it into production. Over a dozen pilots with different customers, some going to production already, everything from infrastructure as a service to applications we're developing in the cloud. So to me, it's all about the focus on what the customer mission and how we can leverage what is a very emerging market. We evaluate about 200 technology companies a year, and I would say half of them now are coming in with new emerging technologies in cloud. So we're looking at adapting and leveraging those every day.
Wow. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I still think the day will be there where, cloud will kind of be like our iPhones and BlackBerries and Androids today, where you need to do something, you'll just reach out and pull it in, but we'll see. Dave Mihelcic, I guess I think of DISA sort of like GSA is to the civilian side as DISA is to the DoD side in terms of being that sort of key player that would be pushing these kinds of initiatives. Can you give us some ideas of what's happening in cloud over in your area?
So exactly, Defense Information Systems Agency is in effect the cloud provider to the Department of Defense, and we've been that provider for 20 years. So we run the DoD's corporate networks, including secure versions of the internet that are encrypted and separated and allow us to do processing at all classification levels. We also consolidated the DoD's mainframe computing centers over 20 years ago, taking them from 160 down to 16 with enormous savings. And what we're doing today is putting in place an infrastructure to provide on-demand scalable cloud services at multiple classification levels so that DoD program managers can put their applications in the cloud and make it easier for their end users to derive service. We already have a number of initiatives underway, including something called Rapid Access Computing Environment, which provides on-demand provisioning of test and development servers. We have certain cloud-based services that enable community and collaborative development, Forge.mil. We've recently turned up a DoD enterprise email service where the Army is the first customer to transition onto that, so they can basically move off of their legacy locally maintained Exchange servers, and perhaps more importantly, give users that ultimate mobility advantage where no matter where they happen to light, what organization they have to be a part of, they have a consistent presence in the cloud. And in terms of the underlying network, as I mentioned, we've been the DoD's network provider even since before DISA was formed, and those IP services, I believe, have been the enabler of cloud. So essentially, I think of cloud as doing for computing what IP did for networking.
Wow, that's a good analogy there. I like that. I'll use that somewhere down the road. Pretend I made it up. No, I'm only kidding. Joe Moorcones, CTO over at SafeNet. I know SafeNet has constantly been challenged to stay in front of technology, especially from a security perspective. We'll get down into security a little bit later, but tell us some of the key initiatives you have going on over around cloud to support your customers.
Well, it's interesting. Almost 3.5 years ago, we started looking at the challenges our customers were having, and it was all about punching holes in their firewalls to connect to other people that were outside their network, and they kind of lost control of the data once it went through the firewall. And we said, we got to start working on that problem. Here comes cloud, and guess what? It's called, let's put all the data out there so we don't have control of it. So all the investment we were making around focusing on data and using things like encryption and key management to encapsulate the data and then release access to that data to the people, to machines, or to applications is really starting to hit home now that we're able to take that technology and apply it to the cloud. We still have a lot of work to do in that space, but we've made unbelievable investments in that, and it's kind of like we want to give you the ability, the tools to control access to data by making sure when it's out there you can decide remotely who gets it, whether it's a machine, an application, a customer, or who launches an instance. You encrypt your instance, and you control when it gets launched out there and protect it. So all that investment is really starting to pay off with our customers. It takes systems to carry these pieces we have to the marketplace. So we're trying to work very closely with all the big system integrators. We're working with DISA and with GSA. You'll even be able to see part of this today if you go to Amazon Web Services. We actually have a model of that up and working. You can actually go in and try it yourself and use key management encryption to launch instances and control data.
Wow.
Encrypted. It's pretty neat.
Cool.
Pretty neat.
Cool, and actually, we're going to drill down a little bit more on that later on in the show, too, because I know security is a big issue, and I think, in my mind, it's also a big opportunity, because, we've been doing the Band-Aid approach to security for years and years and years. Now, if we go to a new model, we can start afresh and look at securing end-to-end security without all those Band-Aids that we've put in there all those years. Greg Pryzby over at Red Hat, I guess, I think of Red Hat, I immediately think open source, and I think as we move to cloud, it seems to me to support movements towards open source kinds of approaches and so forth. But rather than me try to guess, how about if you tell us a little bit about what you're doing to get prepared for the big movement to cloud?
Great. Well, thank you, Jim, for inviting us to be part of this panel today, and I think, you summed it up right there, so I will try to not drone on too long about it, but you're absolutely right. The open standards are what's really important. And, as I look at the people sitting around the table, most of these groups we're working with, we're part of their infrastructure today. We're working on platform delivery for the cloud also with them. And what we really want to do is make sure people think about open standards. We don't want anybody to lock in, because if you look at the 25-point plan, one of the important things is about, agility and standardization of services. And if you were to pick a vendor and to pick a technology and start moving down there, that's the antithesis of what we believe the 25-point plan's about. So we would like people to look at, let's build an infrastructure where we can pick best of breed and replace those pieces very, very quickly. It's all about the agility. And with Red Hat and open source and open standards, we're actually prepared to help you do that. And we'll talk a little bit later, I'll talk about some of the things that we announced last week to go into some of the depth so that you can understand more how we're making that easy for people.
Yeah, terrific. I know if I were starting from scratch today, and look, I'd be trying to move towards as many open standards as possible to keep flexibility in the future, to be able to move quickly, do things quickly, and so forth. So as time goes on, we'll see. Let's switch over, and clearly this big movement to cloud, we anticipate a lot of benefits, savings, efficiency, streamlining, and so forth. Speed, I don't know, but let's talk about some of the things you see that will. Let's start with Dave Mihelcic-DISA this time. Dave, what do you see as some of the key benefits that are going to come out of this?
So a couple I'd like to highlight are speed and agility. To give you an example of speed, a typical DoD big software program might deliver a release every 6 months or 18 months. Using modern agile development techniques, I have small programs that deliver releases every couple of weeks, but that's not good enough. Leading edge companies who deliver services on the internet deliver releases sometimes in a matter of hours. Flickr, for example, delivers on average 10 releases of software a day, and that's really where we need to move with cloud. We need to be able to rapidly develop, test, integrate, and push to production, and we need to be able to rapidly scale that.
Yeah, that sounds exciting to me. The government delivering an application 10 times a day. We're lucky if we get it one time per 10 years. I'm only kidding. Obviously, times are changing, and the types of applications we're talking about are changing. Pete, what do you think? Some of the big benefits energy will accrue out of this?
I have to echo the speed and agility piece. I think it speaks to the question of a capital or an operational expenditure paradigm as you're looking at savings. Folks, just like back in the day of voice over IP wanting to save money and on long distance, which really didn't amount to too much since we were paying pennies. When you're looking at cloud, am I going to save so much money if I hand in my servers, if I move to the cloud? I think that's definitely a piece of it. It's the what do I want to own versus what do I want to lease. But as our federal CIO suggested in an IT reform event a few weeks ago, it's not a matter of doing less with less or even same with similar. It gives us this opportunity to drive change, create opportunities to advance the needs not only of our nation but to collaborate more so and enhance the public-private partnerships. I think it gives us this opportunity, if you're going to get specific about things like mobility, crowdsourcing's been mentioned a couple of times. It really forces the agencies to get innovative, and at Energy we've got such a broad mission, whether it's in the national nuclear security arena, whether it's in the environmental research or just applied or basic scientific computing. We're using taxpayer dollars in the form of grants and contracts. We're spending a heck of a lot of money on infrastructure. If we can move that infrastructure expenditure out to the cloud and really get focusing on what is it we're trying to do to support the mission, as Dave mentioned earlier, I think that's the biggest shift here. So benefits to me are it's forcing an agency to do what it's supposed to be doing with taxpayer dollars and forget about managing the lights and keeping the data up and the internet and that sort of thing, and truly just get in the business of doing what the federal government's about, is
Yeah.
services to citizens.
Yeah, I think we'd be hard pressed to find any mission statement, any government agency that says run IT systems. I think the government's missions are about what the government's mission is, and IT can be handled as a service. Dave McClure, what do you think are some of the big benefits that you see coming out of your efforts?
This is a tough question to be the third responder to, because I think it's hard to add anything to that. I
Kinda
think
like a ditto, huh?
Ditto. I think the simplicity, the speed, the agility, hopefully the cost, which we have some good data that indicates we have potential for huge cost savings. But I'd go back to what Pete just said, and that is, I think the real benefit we're seeing, and I know from myself, from being in cloud service arrangements, it does release your attention away from technology to mission improvement, performance, results, and just thinking, I think, more along those lines. And it's not that all of the headaches go away with IT when you move to cloud environments, but certainly the ability for it to operate in a more simple, consistent, uniform standard really is promising.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's some exciting times ahead. Greg Pryzby, what do you think are some of the benefits from, as you look at what you're doing at Red Hat, what are some of the benefits you see accruing to your customers?
So, we talked a little bit about the open standards, but we didn't really talk a little about the IT governance. So, commoditization of the hardware is very important, but it doesn't solve the problem. Really, we need to be more agile and be able to take into advantage of, being able to work together and to be able to deliver applications a lot quicker. One of the things that we announced last week is something called OpenShift, and the idea behind that is to give a commoditized platform, so it's standard, everybody can get to it, and then very quickly be able to deploy new applications and to get down to the application level, because we need to be, as it started out with Dave saying, agile. The agility is very important. And one of the things that we're looking at is moving away from, if I'm developing software, developing an application, if you think about it, well, I need to get a piece of hardware. Now I need to put an operating system. Now I need to put the stack on top of that to put my application. But imagine a world where all you need to do is say, I want to write something in PHP, or I want to write a Java app. And as a developer, say, check in this piece of code, and all of a sudden it's available for you to run. I don't have to go and provision that entire infrastructure. That is something that we're offering, and I think that makes a big difference and is going to help people. And that's one of the benefits that we hope to bring to the government here in the very near future.
Yeah, we'll drill down on that too when we talk about some challenges. 'Cause I think there's some challenges associated with appropriations and budgeting and long-term budgeting and things like that as you move to that model. But I think they're all can be overcome with some thinking. I want to hear from Joe and Curt on the same issue. But before we do that, we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Dave McClure from GSA, Pete Tseronis from Energy, Dave Mihelcic from DISA, Curt Aubley from Lockheed Martin, Greg Pryzby from Red Hat, and Joe Moorcones from SafeNet. We're talking cloud. When we went to break, we heard from some of our panelists about some benefits, but I want to hear from the others that I didn't. Let's start with Joe Moorcones this time. Joe, what do you see as some of the biggest benefits accruing to your customers as they move to cloud? Do you think we'll see better security?
Well, I got to say ditto for all that everybody said, speed, agility, cost, and everything else. One of the big things I think, though, cloud is going to help us all deal with is this idea of standardizing controls. Greg mentioned about it, our other panelists. For the first time, if you don't really have your act together on how you're going to control and manage the cloud, you're going to be in trouble trying to go to the cloud. So it's going to give us an opportunity to use some of the best practices, the best procedures, get some of the brightest people to help us with the challenges of this new technology. Okay, now how do I control my data? How do I control access? We don't have to be in the old model called everybody has their own data center, everybody has their own configuration of laptops, and we're trying to slam them all together. It's too hard. It's just, you get overwhelmed by the installed base. Here's an idea. Hey, we're going to install a new base, we're going to move things to that. So it's forcing us to think differently about how we would do that. And if we do that successfully, I think it has an opportunity to not only improve security, I mean, it has an opportunity to revolutionize how we control, manage, move data, how fast we bring up applications, as a number of the other panelists have said. So it's really an exciting area. And I think security is going to benefit from this. And if I put my security hat on, as long as we solve the problem of standardization. If everybody does the cloud differently, we'll just have different cloud environments which look like the old data center problem.
That's right. That's right. Well, you get the open source guy there who's next to you, and you're with your standards guy, and we're moving in the right direction. Curt Aubley, since you're last, you could say ditto, 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 but in addition to the ditto, what else might you add to the benefit side of the solution here?
So besides piling on to everybody's good ideas
Right.
here, I definitely see cloud as an innovation engine. And we're seeing the market change from people understanding what cloud is and now how it works. So we've created next-gen innovation centers at Lockheed globally now. And we've had like 100 customers in the last 6 months where we sit down with them and look what their challenges are. And since we understand how things work, get under the covers, because each customer set we're noticing has a different view of the cloud journey. Some are coming in hoping for more efficiencies, right? With 15 billion new things getting on the internet, even though we're lowering the cost per unit of compute, the volume is increasing.
Right.
So managing that over time doesn't guarantee you actually a lower cost basis from a holistic budget perspective.
Good point.
We have other customers that are saying, hey, we need new mission capabilities quickly. How can we do that with the cloud so that we can push applications out so we don't have to worry about rolling out software to 50,000 endpoints? They
Right.
log in the cloud, the endpoint automatically updates it, so everybody's always on the latest version. So to me, cloud is a huge innovation engine for all the areas that I talked about, but we're getting to a point where once you understand how, because you've spent so much time doing it, you can really tailor it to the specific maturity level or goals that a certain customer has.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Curt. Good points. Let's switch over now. We talked about benefits, but I know there's challenges too. I mean, anytime in the government when you're moving a new direction, you know, you've got the culture issues and you've got people worried about security and worried about this, that. I tend to view them as not necessarily constraints. I view them more as challenges that need to be overcome. But anyway, let's start with Pete. Pete, what are some of the tough things or some of the big issues that need to be overcome in order to get where you want to go here?
Right. So I'm going to go with a pretty broad-based answer, and that's culture. And I say that because what cloud gives us is a chance to step back from our entrenched solutions and have a meaningful, hopefully quantifiable discussion about how much a service is worth, managing in-house, or what's that risk-reward ratio for acquiring a service. Case in point, we have folks who love to hug their servers. We have folks who are entrenched in those solutions. Case in point, take Microsoft Word. I've been using it for the bulk of my career. And a colleague of mine recently said, you know, we should really develop this exchange or interaction with folks and leverage the idea of a wiki. Don Burke has developed a solution out at the department called Powerpedia. It's built on an open source software called MediaWiki. Could easily have been a Microsoft SharePoint installation. But the thing is, there's an alternative to the old way of doing business. And at the department, we're looking at, you know, we send files, we send attachments, we send emails, we're ingrained in that. We joked a little earlier about life before cell phones and life before iPads and so forth. But as far as transforming the enterprise, people are set in their ways. And culture typically is something that is the hardest thing to overcome. It has nothing to do with the technology. So information doesn't have to be locked in a file anymore. It could be out there in an open environment for folks to comment on, again, through a wiki, through a blog, what have you. And I think that's what, that's what I know for a fact folks are resistant to, and security is something folks will grab at to say, I don't want to go because there's some security concerns. I personally think that it's embedded in the shifting in culture,
Right.
and the fact that you have to do something differently from the way you've normally been doing it.
Right. Yeah, what I used to tell my security officer, you're not here to tell me I can't do this. You're here to figure out how to get it done. And let's figure that out. Dave McClure, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that you see that need to be overcome?
Well, I first of all echo what you said, Jim. I think we have challenges, but challenges are good for forcing change, and they're also good for forcing innovation, as Curt said a moment ago. So I think we have challenges, but I don't think we have showstoppers. So that's good news. We have some work to do to address some of these. I'll mention 2 or 3 or 4 here. One is security. We'll get to that in a moment. It's not an unsolvable issue for cloud, but it certainly challenges the existing model that we use in the government for securing our data and our systems. So we have to think more creatively and more actively how we pursue security in cloud environments. We have some specific requirements like trusted internet connections. We have data sovereignty laws that also create some challenges for us in this space, but all solvable as we see through some of the GSA procurement vehicles. Second big challenge, I think, is this changes the ballgame for both industry and government in terms of services and pricing. This is a different pricing model than we're used to dealing with in the federal government. We tend to go with task orders and for contracts that are very, very fixed in terms of requirements and people, but this changes the game in terms of flexibility, on demand, scalability. So I don't think it's necessarily just a government problem, it's a provider problem. And then two others. One, I think Pete was hitting on this a moment ago. I think it's time that we're going to see agencies in government, all levels, trying to make decisions on whether they're consumers of cloud services or are they going to be providers of cloud services. So as a CIO, I think I have a big strategy decision that I have to put into the equation here on which one of those or how do I work in both of those models. And then lastly, everyone's been referring to this. This is the year of moving to cloud. This is the year where we stop debating models and concepts and we actually have some real services on the ground. I think this is a real challenge for CIOs to manage in a hybrid cloud, non-cloud environment. So we're really at GSA looking for vendors that have very dynamic management approaches to really optimizing IT performance that's both cloud-based and non-cloud-based, because we know we won't move everything to cloud systems in the government.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's back to my comment about the data centers and cloud. I think people doing data center consolidation are trying to make that decision. What are we putting in our own data center and what can we move to the cloud? And that sets up that hybrid environment that you're talking about. I also think like your comment on services and pricing, because I think the risk sharing changes here, especially in these days of continuing resolutions and appropriations and budget cuts. If you're asking industry to offer something as a service and make an investment in infrastructure, provide it back as a service, it raises that question of funding each year, will it be there, and so forth. So it adds some risk sharing. Dave Mihelcic, what do you think are some of the big challenges that you think that you need to overcome to get where you want to go?
Biggest challenge is not going first and answering this question because the other panelists have hit the highlights. But, one of the things that we're focusing on is stovepipes and doing away with stovepipes. If you have a legacy application that services your small organization and, you move that into the cloud and it continues to be a stovepipe centered around a small organization, you really haven't changed anything. What we're seeking to do is promote capabilities from locally relevant to globally relevant so that they can service our entire enterprise. And one of the keys in doing that is to have a standard database of identity for everyone in our enterprise, the Department of Defense, and have standard mechanisms for authenticating whether or not a user should have access to a particular service or a piece of data. And by doing that, we break down many of the barriers that we have to data information sharing. Our IT, the way it's traditionally been designed, often impedes information sharing because we have silos and stovepipes that have local databases of account information. If you're not in that database, you cannot possibly access the information. We want to move away from that and instead control access based on a user's identity and their attributes, their clearance, their job function, their need to know, as opposed to the fact that they happen to be someone who's part of a local organization.
Yeah, very good. Good points. Someone had brought up governance earlier, and I think the government needs to look at a lot of things differently. For example, a lot of agencies have these technical reference models and things like that where they have this long process where you have to go through to get a piece of software into the SOA or into their enterprise. And when you think of cloud, it's like to me, it becomes irrelevant. I mean, cloud, you're going to want to put things up there and pull them down quick. You're not going to want to have this detailed process. By the time you go through a technical reference model approach, the technology will likely be several generations behind. So I think it's going to challenge in a lot of ways that way. Curt, Aubley, what do you think are some of the big challenges need to be overcome to get where the government hopes to get?
Well, there's at least three that come to mind that perhaps complement the panel a little. One is acquisition can be a challenge. We're seeing customers wanting to get to the cloud
point.
services. We can deliver a secure private cloud within 2 weeks anywhere they want it on the planet, but how do they acquire that so that they can deliver those cloud services? Also, what the art of the possible is, since the market's changing so quickly. I mean, we bring customers in, we work with our cybersecurity alliance of what the art of the possible is and to meet security challenges, but also how do they assemble applications at higher speeds?
Right.
And then how do they leverage the big data? Because we put everything into these clouds, and it's generating all this, a new buzzword probably for next year with big data, right?
Right.
So what do you do with all this unstructured data? It's actually quite valuable to leverage to help your mission and maybe improve your applications and your experience to your customers to help that, mobile workforce they have. And then finally, I'd like to think different theme that Dave mentioned, but there's foundations I think we still can't forget, which is strong program management, good system engineering integration, top-down design that's still needed, and operational excellence. Everybody has challenges in operations, and just recently there was a couple of big outages all across the internet for some big providers. It happens to everyone, but when you look under the covers, they say, what was the challenges they ran into? It was an operational excellence challenge, even though they're using maybe industry standards like ITIL.
Right.
Managing a cloud sounds easy, but really is a challenge.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's not like, hey, we'll just push it to the cloud and forget about it. It's going to take some discipline and some vigilance to make sure things work. Joe Moorcones, what do you think from a SafeNet perspective? What do you see as the biggest challenges that need to be overcome to keep this thing rolling?
Well, again, ditto, people have talked about them, but one of the key areas, I think, is the way people measure whether or not we've met some set of requirements, whether it's a security requirement, a compliance requirement, a control requirement. That model and the people who actually do that work has to change, because if we go out in the cloud and we do things completely different, completely new, somebody's going to say, so is that equivalent to me if it was on that server there that I can go see and touch it and measure it and feel it? And those are the people who are, in a sense, sometimes putting up their hands saying, hey, you can't do that because I can't measure it using the ruler I have. You got the wrong ruler. We got to give them a new way. So, that may fit into, it's hard for procurement. It's hard to just apply today's world. So I think the idea of the people who are measuring whether we're going to be successful in the cloud with the traditional approaches is a big challenge we've got to overcome, because they're the ones who are going to say, yeah, you did it, you didn't, or this is okay, or it's not. And you don't want them to say it's not okay because I don't understand what you're doing. And I got a measurement over here, you're measuring height, and I want you to measure volume, and you're walking around with a tape measure. It doesn't work, I'm sorry. So I think that's probably one of the really, really big ones. The other one is, in that same model, visibility. Being able to say, I know the equivalent of where my stuff went and who had access to it, so I can report back. And it kind of ties into that measurement thing too. How do I measure that? How am I going to do that in the cloud? Data center, it's a little easier. Maybe it's a little hard because everyone's a little bit differently and you're kind of jumbling around. But I think that's going to be a really big challenge that we've got to overcome to be successful, because it's deployment that works, not planning. And deployment can be enhanced or stopped by the measurement people.
Yeah, great points. That compliance side, they're really focused on that. But if you start putting data together and putting different bureaus on the same machines and so forth, holding security officers and so forth responsible for compliance is going to become an interesting challenge, because it's going to be multiple players and involved in that. Greg Pryzby at Red Hat, what do you see as some of the big challenges that we need to overcome to keep this thing rolling and moving in the direction where we like it to go?
So the thing that I think is the most interesting is our three agency panelists said. They all seem relatively same panel. I mean, everybody starts with, well, if I went first, it'd be much easier. Ditto. So I think that's actually good that we all are coming to an agreement of what cloud is, what the benefits are, and what the challenges are. I think one of the biggest challenges is probably the process, because the government and people need to start thinking about things differently. Instead of, let's go gather requirements, they were talking about, and I believe it was, building a piece of equipment in the DoD that it would take from the time that they came up with the idea, so the RFP, to implementation could be as much as 4 or 5 years. And when we get to the cloud, that's unacceptable. As David said, 10 releases a day, right? That's our goal. And to be able to do that, we really need to change the process and how we think about things. And one of the ways to do that is to use an open source community type model, which is one of the things that actually Red Hat does every single day. There's something called the Fedora project, which people may be familiar with, where Red Hat is working with the community. We take that And through a lot of communication, a lot of collaboration, we're able to build something and then be able to take that to the next step and make it enterprise ready so that anybody can use that. So being able to move through a process is something that's very important. And when it goes to the IT governance, we can take that exact open source community model and say, hey, here's something and let's work to collaborate together to add functionality or feature, to modify something, maybe even remove something, but very quickly be able to make those changes and make it available. So that's probably the hardest thing that I see is changing the process and the mindset.
Right. Let's, while we're talking challenges here, let's drill down a little bit more on that security question, because I think what I run into talking with CIOs around town the most is people are concerned about, if I go to the cloud, am I losing control and security and so forth? So it has to be addressed. Let's start with Dave Mihelcic. Dave, DISA, obviously security is a big priority in DoD. How are you addressing that security question for cloud?
So we build the controls into the cloud, starting at the network boundary with our secure gateways from the internet to the NIPRNet, our sensitive but unclassified network. We monitor the traffic. We have a standard architecture that allows internally facing servers to be separate from externally facing servers in a DMZ. And as I mentioned, we have a standard approach to authentication and access control that allows us to have users move their information securely into that cloud and not be concerned about being commingled with data that's going to be freely shared with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I want to hear from our other panelists on the same subject, but we first need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. To the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Dave McClure from GSA, Pete Tseronis from Energy, Dave Mihelcic from DISA, Curt Aubley from Lockheed Martin, Greg Pryzby from Red Hat, and Joe Moorcones from SafeNet. We're talking cloud computing and securing cloud computing. When we went to break, we had heard from DISA. Let's go to GSA. Dave, how are you looking at that question? Because I'm sure a lot of the CIOs are raising the issue. How are we going to deal with the security in a cloud environment?
Yes, definitely. Well, I think, we've been talking about this program we've been working on called FedRAMP for months and months. And it's really an involvement to not just GSA, but the entire IT community, NSA, DoD, the Intel community, the CISOs around the agencies, the White House, OMB, GSA, the CIO Council. I mean, everybody's been in at the table, which has made this a very rich discussion, but a very, very challenging discussion to get agreement and consensus on what the problems are that we need to address in cloud security. And this is probably a topic we could go on for days about, but I think, essentially what FedRAMP is trying to do is to simplify the security process for the government. The way it operates now, it's very compliance-focused, and it's very one-by-one oriented. So if I'm a cloud vendor or even non-cloud vendor, I take my product or service and I literally go agency by agency by agency and get security accreditation and authorities to operate. So if we can redesign a process that allows us to leverage these accreditations and certifications across agencies, we think we can do this process 4 times faster, and we think we can do it at half the cost of what we're spending on it right now. That in of itself should be enough to light some eyeballs and really make people pay attention. I think we've gotten very close. We've worked very closely on the access controls and the controls from the NIST framework that we think are applicable in cloud environments. And we are shifting a lot of this to continuous monitoring because the cloud creates challenges for us in terms of the flexibility and fluidity by which data can move and information can be shared. And while we don't necessarily care to think about that, that's one of the advantages of cloud computing, it does create some controls issues for us. So I think going to continuous monitoring, as you'll see with FedRAMP, in a much more dynamic way will allow us to have more of a real-time view of the security posture of any agency. And that's very important in a cloud environment.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're sort of like real-time everything these days. Pete Tseronis, what do you think, Pete, in terms of that security question? How's Energy viewing that?
Well, the simple answer is personally that the way to address cloud computing security is the same way you'd address security for any other enterprise infrastructure in my estimation. In practice, there are definitely some differences, but people forget, to Dave's point, that there are folks all across the U.S. government right now focusing on this specific issue. We've got a vast proven investment of knowledge and experience already in place. And people who raise security as an obstacle aren't typically the security professionals in my mind. I've spoken with a number of people, and that's always the first thing to kind of shoot down the idea. But if the cloud decision is based on a business investment and security leading the charge in identifying risks and resolving concerns, if that isn't good enough for you when you take that approach or look at the aspects of FedRAMP, which are really looking to leverage all security controls and figure out what could and could not work for a specific agency, then walk away and don't dismiss it out of uncertainty. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say.
Right.
So programs like FedRAMP are really pulling and culling together all the agency's concerns, and to me, it's a no-brainer. If there's a model that fits, and if there's a profile or a program or security plan that an agency could say, if it's good enough for DOE, it might be good enough for me, you should take advantage of
Sure.
it. If not, you create the cloud sprawl, you have agencies calling specific vendors, and what we do is we spread the concern and, in essence, the security risk across the federal government. But in short, I think there's security risks can be broken down to user perspective, network perspectives, vendor perspectives, and legal. From a user standpoint, identity management, if it's something you're doing in-house today, moving or migrating to a cloud environment might give you an opportunity to audit and manage those identities a little bit more so and to get back to the innovation side and not focus on that aspect. Single sign-on solutions could be an opportunity. Vendor lock-in's a concern. I liked what Greg had said earlier about, are people really concerned that Microsoft's going to lock your Exchange server or Oracle's going to pull the licenses for your database? But open source and open standards component, big shout out to folks like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and VMware, and many others who are committing to this criteria. I think that helps broaden the scope of if there's a security concern, we have more people there to help solve a problem. From a network perspective, obviously I've worked in operations in the past. I believe in distributed environments. I believe in trust the internet. I think if we don't trust the internet and we believe we can do it better in-house, well, that's a prerogative folks might have, but I think mostly in government, the idea of transitioning it out to the cloud is something that can actually enhance our security posture. So those are some areas. I didn't mention the legal, but that speaks to the whole work that
Right.
GSA's been doing with a lot of the apps.gov, and I think we should take advantage
Yeah,
of
well, I
it.
think like Dave said, we could probably talk this subject all day, in terms of, let's go to Joe Moorcones. Joe, I would think a company like SafeNet, where security is the core, you've been thinking about this issue a little bit. What do you think, how do you see the security issue getting resolved as we move to a cloud world?
Well, when we think of cloud, it's all about identity and authentication. If we're going to move things around, or the customer's going to move things around, you got to know who you're moving it to, and then on the basis of that, they got to be able to prove who they are. So we see identification authentication as being an absolutely core piece of this, and whether it uses cryptography or some other mechanism, the stronger it is, the more trust you can have. So we think of it as a trusted cloud fabric. I mean, that's kind of our buzzword. So we want to be able to provide the capability to do strong authentication. And for instance, for the DoD, we have a card now called the SC650, sort of a plug for SafeNet. But it has been approved for use for logon on SIPRNet. And it has, in addition to having a traditional single credential, we were already thinking interoperability, sharing data. So we actually have the capability to store 4 separate credentials on that card that could offer some interim ways for people now to cross-communicate without having to physically move data between places. And maybe in the long run, it could be a common credentialing thing for things to share data through the cloud, for cybersecurity, for warnings, threats, law enforcement, all the way top and bottom. So big area for us. The second area of society is trusted cloud fabric. We are really using key management and encryption as the focal point for giving the customer control. We're doing that because obviously we're a security company, but we think it's the right way to do it. It is the one common element where you can have standards, you can have a common way to encrypt stuff, you can have a common way to manage keys in that, and you can have a common way to distribute those keys if you have a really good identification authentication mechanism in place. So that's where we're really investing. We have been doing that. We also think that if you invest in these kinds of strategies today in your traditional data center, it actually will help you move to the cloud.
There you go.
So if you had this,
Right.
if you didn't have this in place before, jumping to the cloud could be really hard. So we think we're well positioned now to help customers who can't afford to move immediately for a lot of the legacy stuff, if they could adapt some of the stuff. It's kind of like being cloud-ready for the trusted cloud fabric.
I
So
like that, cloud ready. There you go. Hey, very good. Curt, Aubley, what do you think? How's Lockheed look at approaching this security question? And it goes back to my risk equation a little bit. I mean, if people are going to entrust you to, say, run their cloud or operate their cloud, there's going to be security expectations.
Absolutely. So it's always interesting when I work with customers and I ask them, I give a premise, hey, cloud can provide a better level of security than you even have today because you have that visibility of all your assets. But that foundation, actually, to applaud Pete and GSA and their work in FedRAMP, that provides that foundation that everybody can work from. And I think that it really is critical because for us, it's not really about security per se, it's about mission success. So we take what we call an intelligence-driven approach to cloud security. If we understand the threats that we're seeing in the market, they're adapting daily. You know, we have the 80% threat as kind of the known threat, the 20% unknown threat that changes every day. We have our own security intelligence centers, our Cyber Alliance cyber intelligence. That drives heavily the type of cloud architecture, solutions, and standards we use for both the design as well as the operational excellence to ensure that the solutions are resilient, but tailored, right? So some solutions may just need consumer-grade security. You know, you can just go in, and that's great. But then there's other ones, depending on what your mission is, you might need a higher level of security, and that, based on cybersecurity intelligence, the type of threats you're going to find are much more challenging.
Yeah.
So those kinds of, to manage those type of threats,
Right.
the cloud architecture and solutions and operations is going to be a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the good news is, since you understand that what's under the covers of cloud, you know all your assets,
Right.
that's like step one. You got that FedRAMP CNA, you know all your assets, you got your continuous monitoring. Now you can do all kinds of creative things to ensure your success.
Sure. Thanks. Well put, Curt. Greg, Pryzby, we'll go to you, but I'm going to change the question because we're down to less than, we have a little less than 10 minutes to go, and I'd like to hear sort of the future as to where all this is going from all of you. So I'm going to ask you all to take about a minute and a half to sort of like put on your vision and look in your crystal ball and say what's going to happen down the road in the future here. Where's this all taking us, Greg? What do you see as sort of where this cloud environment's going to take us down the road?
Government App Store.
Government App Store.
So there you go. But I'll expand on that a little bit because I want to take a little bit of time. If you look at, you want to talk about what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years. So you have to look at who those workers are. So you look today to see who are the, kids between 10 and 20. These are going to be the government workers of the future. And they're used to working in a very collaborative environment, right? They're used to a social environment where sharing is something that they're used to. You looked at between texting, between Twitter, between Facebook. They're out there, they're talking. And that is something that, Red Hat helps foster through the open source community and plays very, very closely into that. So from that, we believe that you can make it easy for these people to come, and now working for the government can be as exciting as working or even more exciting than a startup if you give them this collaborative environment. And so we think by bringing them together, by making that available to them and saying, hey, let's create an app store where you can create things so that DOE solves a problem, and they say, you know what, who else wants to use it? And DISA says, hey, I want to use that, or anybody says, yeah, that sounds great, let's make it easy for them, and we think that will happen.
Right, yep, I like it. To the cloud, government app store, pull it in, make it happen. Joe Moorcones, what do you think? What's it all look like down the road to you, Joe?
Well, I think it is a 5-year picture. It's not going to happen tomorrow because there's still a lot of things we all have to do to get our acts together and to put things in place. But I like to think of it that you do it once and now it's available to anybody that needs to have it. It's going to be fast, it's going to be quick, and a lot of the things that we are maybe fearful of today with things in the cloud that problem's going to go away because people are going to show us how we're going to be able to, if we launch something and it's not what we thought it was supposed to be because of our standard, we won't launch it. And we'll launch another instance till the right one gets out there. And it's going to take the model of attacks and vulnerabilities, change them in a whole different way. And it's really going to help people do things faster, quicker, and it's going to make it much easier for us to help the customers do things with their clients, whether it's citizens or whether it's in the DoD or it's cybersecurity. So I think cloud's going to be here. It's going to come. It's going to hit some challenges. We'll have some big blips on the way, but eventually we're going to see we have to do it because the budgets aren't there to do it the old way. So we got to figure out how to solve the problem. We all know the technology's there. I think it's going to happen. It's just going to take evolution 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's exciting times ahead. Dave Mihelcic, what do you think from the DISA point? What's your crystal ball look like out there?
All right, so we're going to eliminate all these stovepipes that I talked about earlier, and a user is going to be able to go anywhere in the world, a DoD warfighter, any device, and access the information they need to accomplish their mission. That's not the way it has been traditionally. If you look at the travels of a mobile user in the DoD, they might go from base to base to base and never be able to get on a network because they're not authorized to log into that domain. We want to eliminate that. I want a warfighter to be able to walk up to any machine, insert their identity credential in that Joe talked about earlier, be able to log onto that network, and not only get some level of service, be able to reach into the cloud, pull their applications out of the cloud, pull their data out of the cloud, and be able to ubiquitously share their information with anyone that they need to. We've already taken steps in this direction. We fielded something called the DoD Visitor Program last year. It allows the minimum interoperability between systems, so a DoD user can take their identity credential, plug it into any DoD PC, and at least log on to the network. It doesn't guarantee that their data has been moved into the cloud. It doesn't guarantee that their applications are available in the cloud, but at least they can get that basic access. And now we have to start fighting all those other problems of moving the applications and the data into the cloud.
Fantastic. Well put. Curt Aubley, what's your vision for the future look like? As a CTO, your job is to think out there, right? So
That's the most fun part of the job.
There you
because
go.
When you predict a future, you're never exactly wrong because it changes every day. From a big picture perspective, converged life. So a context-aware cloud environment that is seamless and secure, and both you can get anything you want from a consumer, you can create and be a provider for others, but you're no longer constrained to waiting for an app for that or constrained to a stack for that people.
Right.
You can assemble and take whatever you need to get your mission done in a secure fashion, wherever, whenever, on anything you want.
Yeah, terrific. Different model, but one that would be delightful to see.
You asked for 10 years.
Pete Tseronis, what do you think is the future looks like?
I think the future in the next couple of years is no longer having simply a cloud vision. It's not a black or white decision. I think it's something where, as today, the embracing of the excitement around cloud has led to what has become an instantiation of cloud throughout agencies. Getting to a point where we aren't having discussion of, do we have a commodity-based type of cloud solution for a department? You know, email as a service, the good work at GSA, telephony as a service. These basic things need to become enterprise-focused. They can't be specific to that stovepipe in an agency. I see federal government dollars being attributed less to the infrastructure, which we know in the $80 billion plus a year we spend a lot on IT infrastructure. It'd be great to see how that's going to be reduced due to the cloud opportunities. And I see GSA vehicles becoming that open source for procurement portal. So all this great work that's being negotiated up front, that agencies are using those vehicles. Agencies today don't take advantage enough of what GSA does for a living. And I say that, you know, in 5 years, if we're not using those, then we're doing a disservice to the taxpayers and not taking advantage of those cost savings.
Yeah,
So.
well put. Well put. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate that. Dave McClure, what do you see out there? What's your vision for where this is all going to go? You're sort of like right in the heart of this thing. So what's your thinking in terms of down the road?
Well, I think it's simple. I think the future is going to be a trusted, consumer-based computing model. That's largely what we're trying to achieve here. Most of the time in government, what we hear from IT shops are the reasons why something can't be done fast, easy, and conveniently. And I think that model is going out the door. I think we're moving into an environment where I, as a consumer or worker in an agency, working through my team, through my management, I should be able to select, provision, and manage a solution in days or weeks. That's a game-changing orientation to the way government buys, procures, uses, and manages IT. So that, to me, is sort of the model for the future, a trusted, user-based, consumer-based model to computing that really empowers the workforce to focus on mission results as opposed to trying to unravel all the barriers that are in their way now.
Yeah, I think that's well put, Dave. I think we get the government focused on mission as opposed to IT problems and issues. Let me do a few summary comments here of some of the things we heard. On the benefit side, I think we heard from everybody, speed and agility are two things that jump right out at you in terms of benefits that can accrue from cloud. I think as time goes on, it's like everything as a service. I mean, we got software as a service, infrastructure as a service, email as a service, SharePoint as a service. Why don't we just start saying everything as a service is the goal for down the road. Pointing out also is the need for governance, that this isn't something where, yeah, we throw it into the cloud and lo and behold, everything's great. It's going to take some governance and some discipline to make sure things are managed. I heard a lot of talk about standardization and open source solutions as very enablers to get there. And if we can standardize, we can secure it. If we can standardize, we can get things done. So it's going to be very important. We don't want every agency in the cloud with totally different technologies and standards and whatever, and we're right where we are today with interoperability issues. Challenges, culture, once again, comes through as a big one. You're asking people to change. People don't change without a little bit of issues along the way. Security, we drilled down on hybrid environments, risk sharing, acquisition issues, compliance issues, all need to be dealt with, but we have all agreed that they're challenges, but they can easily be overcome. It's just going to take some work to do that. The future, we heard about the government app store. I like that analogy, and I agree with Dave here. I think in the future, agencies can focus on their mission while IT will be offered as services to support the mission. And as mission changes, the IT services can change to create environments like that. I think GSA is going to play a major role here in the civilian side and DISA on the DoD side. And I think you're right. It's going to happen. It's not when. It's not if, it's when. So let me say thanks first to our sponsors who allow us to do the show. Thanks to WTOP, WFED Radio, and to our panelists here. You're all very, very busy individuals and with high-level jobs to take time out to come be with us. We greatly appreciate that. And finally, thanks to the listening audience out there for tuning into the show. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.